So before we continue, I was asked to make a short announcement. The program most of you know, but for those who don't know, the Katha and Kirtan with Maharajas will continue till 4 o'clock, and then we'll continue with Abhishek and Pushpanjali, and at 6:30 there will be feast. For those of you who would need to answer the nature call, Prabhus can find very nicely made shades just on your left side, and the Mataji has to go towards community hall in front and back. Hare Krishna. Shri Gaura Purnima Mahotsava ki.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Vachakalpatarubhyascha kripasindu bhayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. I'd like to begin by, offering my obeisances to my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, who has opened my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge while I was standing blinded by the darkness of material existence. I'd also like to offer my obeisances to my very dear godbrothers who dragged me and pulled me here. This morning I wasn't feeling well, but that's not really a very good excuse. I was sitting up and walking, so they encouraged me to come here, and I'm very grateful that I've come, that I can have their association. In particular, Srivaram Swami, because actually he's my sannyas guru. I took sannyas next to him in 1979, but he was mentioning a few names of devotees who, unfortunately, in this lifetime have fallen away from the path of Krishna consciousness. No doubt Krishna will bring them back in the future, because there's no loss of ammunition on this path of devotional service. But when my sannyas guru fell away, I made a beeline for Maharaj, and I begged him to be my sannyas guru, and at first he said no. I'm sure he had his reasons. Why take on a fallen soul like me? But out of true friendship and compassion, he took me on, and therefore I adhere to his example and to his instructions. His example is exemplary, and his instructions are very valuable for me. I'm a, how would you say, I'm a follower of his writings. Nava Braja Mahima is a compilation of 7 books. It's basically his heartfelt offering to Srila Prabhupada in compiling the teachings of the Acharyas, in particular the 6 Goswamis, in a form that's readable by just common people like you and me in ISKCON. Just as Mahaprabhu gave the instructions to the 6 Goswamis to go through all the Vedic literatures and take those verses that prove Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They made it very clear in their writings. What was inaccessible to the common people became accessible by the mercy of the 6 Goswamis. But as Kali Yuga progresses, it becomes more difficult to understand these things. So I feel that Maharaj has made a monumental contribution which has not yet been recognized in our International Society of Krishna Consciousness, that he took all the teachings of the Acharyas, the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would refer in his books that he would like us to read Brihad Bhagavatamritam, for example, and other Goswami literatures. Maharaj made it very accessible. How many of you have read fully that 7-volume treatise by Srila Ramaswamy? 9 volumes. Well, there's the map and everything. How many of you have read fully? Even less than Brihad Bhagavatamritam. So I encourage you because much of what I say in my lectures, a good 30 or 40%, comes from his writings. It makes me look intelligent, or perhaps I know something about Braj Bhakti. I don't know anything. I'm just a parrot who repeats. So I feel very sheltered with him today, especially on this day because he's my sannyas guru, and also my very good friend, Bhakti Bhringa Govinda Swami Maharaj. Very good friends. And one of my counselors is His Holiness Niranjan Swami. Those who are close to me know I'm always a little nervous around Maharaj because he always says what's the facts, what's the truth, where I have to improve in Krishna consciousness. So I'm very grateful for that because without taking out the weeds, the Bhakti Lata beach cannot grow properly. So I'm very happy to be in association of these saints, actually, saintly persons. And I'm remembering with fondness 40 years ago today, 4 decades, almost half a century, myself and Maharaj sat in the building over there and we took our sannyas vows, not really knowing what it really meant to be a sannyasi, how to be renounced, and what's more, how to take on the burden of love of pushing on the Sankirtan movement. Because actually sannyasis are meant to be at the forefront, in the sense they're meant to push on the movement, to take risks, and travel, and go to unknown places, and share Krishna consciousness with others. Of course, one may also be a Kshetra sannyasi, to stay in the Dham. One time, 2 sannyasis came before Srila Prabhupada. Devotees were observing, and Prabhupada told one sannyasi, your duty is to travel and preach. And the other sannyasi was looking forward to the same instruction. And Prabhupada said, your service is to stay in Vrindavan and manage things very nicely. So really, sannyas embodies that statement by Srila Prabhupada, I believe, from Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, that Krishna consciousness means to sometimes accept things which were not so easily acceptable by us for the purpose of spiritual advancement, and to give up things which are not favorable for advancing in Krishna consciousness. This is the test of a sincere devotee. And it embodies the idea of sannyas, that we give up everything for preaching Krishna consciousness. Yesterday I spoke a little bit about the sannyas ashram at our program. There were just a few devotees there. I'd just like to reiterate a few of those ideas because, well, repetition is necessary to fully understand something. And they were very interesting points about the sannyas ashram. And I mentioned that a few weeks ago, somebody put online that this would be our 40th anniversary, and somebody wrote me that we are not real sannyasis because there's no mention of sannyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava literature. And I checked with one of my pundits, Hari Parshad Prabhu, who's on the Shastra Advisory Committee. It said it's actually a fact. There's no direct instruction in Gaudiya literature that one should take up the sannyas order, but there's many examples. You could maybe say that example is higher than precepts. That's there in the English-speaking language. But there are a number of examples of exalted devotees who actually took the sannyas order, went through the ceremony, and accepted the Tridandi. And one, of course, is Sri Gadadhar Pandit, who took sannyas in Jagannath Puri, and the great illustrious Prabodhananda Saraswati. He's a favorite of many Gaudiya Vaishnavas. He wrote the many verses about the glories of Sri Vrindavan, Vrindavan Mahimamrita. He wrote Radharasa Sudhanidhi for very advanced devotees. He was the uncle of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. He was present when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Sri Rangam, and inspired by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave up everything and came to Vrindavan, and he was a Kshetra sannyasi. It means, a Kshetra sannyasi means one who vows never to leave Vrindavan. Other sannyasis, they have the vow that they can only stay in one place for 3 days, and they have to move on. A rolling stone gathers no moth. So 2 types of sannyasis. So that example is there. In our tradition, there are sannyasis who took the Tridandi staff as different from the Ekadandi sannyasis. The Mayavadis, who believe everything's one, they have the Ekadanda. Another example, to put to rest my critics' argument, is the example of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Actually, before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, most advanced souls and most renunciants were Babajis. Sometimes we don't speak favorably of Babajis, but Babaji is also a bona fide ashram. Our own Srila Prabhupada gave Babaji to one devotee in the 1970s. This devotee, Udalami was his name, he had cancer. Apparently he had cancer. He had not long to live. So Prabhupada had a whole ceremony where he gave Udalami Babaji. And he joked a little bit. Not joked, but he said, this is our first Babaji in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he gave him the instruction to stay here in Mayapur and eat frugally and spend most of his time chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is another example of someone who officially took sannyas. And in my ongoing discussion with that devotee, he said, yes, but it's not bona fide because he didn't take initiation from a living sannyasi guru. So it wasn't bona fide. These are nonsense arguments, but in case you hear them sometimes, you know how to refute them. My reputation was that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he took sannyas from a picture of his Guru Maharaj. That devotee said, well, I said, no. In a letter, actually a lecture Prabhupada gave in New York, September 16, 1966, Prabhupada said, those who are spiritually advanced, their photograph, an ordinary photograph, is different. Just like here is a statue of Krishna. We accept this statue is non-different from Krishna. The original person Krishna and the statue of Krishna is the same. Similarly, a spiritually perfect person and his photograph are the same. Because it is the absolute stage. In the absolute stage there is no difference. In the material stage there's difference. Is that clear? Just like in the early days we didn't have statues or deities of Krishna. We had paintings. And when I first joined the movement and Prabhupada sent us to France, I remember walking into the first temple in France in the Fontenay-aux-Roses, and there was this very rudimentary painting of Panchatattva, almost like, I don't want to say this probably not proper, but like stick figures. The artist was sincere, but she wasn't so talented. And I kept looking at that picture thinking, how am I supposed to see the Panchatattva in this painting? Then Prabhupada came about a month later. And as we escorted him into the temple room, I saw his eyes light up when he looked at the picture of Panchatattva. And with great awe and veneration, even more so with devotion, Prabhupada proceeded to go in front of that painting of Panchatattva and fold his hands, and his hands were trembling. And his eyes were filled with tears. With great respect, he paid obeisance. He stood up and said, all glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I got an idea of what deity worship was. The mercy of the Lord, he enters into these so-called material elements, and by his mercy he's present so that we can serve his lotus feet. So similarly, Prabhupada said the photo of the spiritual master is non-different than the spiritual master. So I brought this up to the person I was speaking with, and he went silent. Because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took sannyas from a photo of his Guru Maharaj. So there's another example in recent history of the Tridandi sannyas ashram being completely bona fide. There's another example of a devotee of the Lord who took sannyas not in front of a living guru sannyasi. And that is Sri Ramanujacharya. This is described in the Yati Raj Vaibhava Stotra of one of his great devotees, Sri Andrapurna. And there he describes that when it came time for Ramanujacharya to accept the sannyas order and establish the sannyas order in his sampradaya, there was no Tridandi sannyasi, so he came before the deity of the Lord. And he spoke to the deity, the Ranganath deity. Actually, sometimes these great acharyas, they speak to the deities and the deities speak back to them. At the installation of the little Radha Krishna deities in Los Angeles, Prabhupada was installing Shota Radha Krishna brass. And he stopped pouring the substance and he said, if you see these deities like brass, they'll remain brass to you forever. But if you worship these deities according to the rules and regulations that I've established, and you learn to worship with them with love, Prabhupada said, one day these deities will speak to you. And one time Ramanujacharya, he asked the deity, he said, Lord, Ranganath, that big deity, that lying down, Ranganath with Lakshmi massaging his lotus feet, very beautiful deity in Sri Lanka. They have 3 different altars, so you can see the head of the Lord, the waist of the Lord, and the feet of the Lord. Very big. You go to 3 altars. Not you see different deities, you see the same deity, but different parts of the deity's absolute form. So he said, my dear Lord, what happens? What happens if the devotee, although he's performed devotional service his whole life, cannot remember you at the moment of death? Let us say that he's unconscious or he's in a coma. What happens if your devotee cannot remember you at the moment of death? The deity spoke to Ramanujacharya, and I love this reply. If my devotee cannot remember me at the moment of death, I will remember my devotee. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki. Why not? A devotee spent his or her life as best they could at their capacity serving the Lord. And love is always something reciprocal, so have no fear. Remember. So it's described by that devotee, Sri Andrapurna. He says, Pattim pari yaja sa vitaraga Sri Deva Rajam Pani Patya Tajmat Tuya Shramam Sri Kritavan Tadosa Devopi Tasmai Yati Rajanama. Having given up his wife, speaking about Ramanuja, he was firmly detached from all attachment. He surrendered himself to Lord Bharadwaja and accepted the sannyas ashram. The Lord himself bestowed sannyas upon him and gave him the name Yatiraj, king among sannyasis. The Lord spoke. So that young Brahmana said, Lord, please come and bear witness for me. Come to Orissa and bear witness. And the deity said, but I'm a deity, how can I walk? And the boy very intelligently said, Lord, if you can talk, you can walk. So don't think the deities cannot speak. That's a very mundane idea of the deity. The deity is fully conscious, not different than Krishna. So at his sannyas ceremony, he took sannyas in front of the deity, and the deity spoke to him and gave him the name Yatiraj. My dear Ramanuja, you are king of the sannyasis. So he received the sannyas order from the Lord himself. So these are examples in our sampradaya and other Vaishnava sampradayas of the establishment of the Tridandi order of sannyas. Then my critic, actually he surrendered in the end, but the critic, he said, but Maharaj, with all due respect, generally we should understand that sannyas is forbidden in Kali Yuga. You guys have made a mistake. Sannyas is forbidden. And I said yes, and I quoted the verse. Asvamedam gavalambam sannyasam palapakrikam devarena sutopatim kalo pancha vivarjite. In this age, 5 acts are forbidden. The offering of a horse or a cow into the sacrificial fire. They used to do that to prove the potency of the mantra. But by putting the horse or the cow into the sacrificial fire, the cow or the horse came back out with the human form of life. The acceptance of sannyas, the offerings of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. Verboten. Deutsch. Not allowed. So he said, what do you say about that? So I said, yes, our Prabhupada, he said that sannyas means Mayavad sannyas. All Mayavadis should be forbidden because they're the greatest offenders to Krishna. But Prabhupada said, when that verse is speaking, that verse is actually from the, I believe it's from the Varaha Purana, that sannyas is forbidden. It means Mayavad sannyas. Because Mayavadis, too many people took Mayavadi sannyas. There's already a big problem in this world. There's no God. The Mayavadi sannyasis say that you are God. So in this way they would increase the ignorance amongst human beings that we're all God. And then there's an interesting conversation between two personalities of what is the actual definition of sannyas. And Maharaj, Sri Maharaj has given the perfect definition of sannyas according to our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. It's there in our sannyas mantra, the goal of the sannyas, or the goal of everyone in Krishna consciousness. So I probably shouldn't speak because my teacher has explained everything perfectly, but you can sometimes strengthen our faith by hearing an explanation from different points of view. So what is a sannyasi? There's one Upanishad called the Jabala Upanishad. And there King Janaka and the sage Yajnavalkya are speaking together. And Janaka, he approaches Yajnavalkya and he asks the following. He says, Bhagavan Sanyasam Bruhiti. O Lord, please explain to human society what is sannyas. And Yajnavalkya, you've heard his name before, he's a famous personality mentioned. Yajnavalkya replied, Yat ahar eva vrijet, tad ahar eva paravajet. The moment one feels detached from everything, one is ready for sannyas. How do we know if we're ready to take sannyas? Well, according to Yajnavalkya, the moment that you feel totally detached from everything, then you're ready for sannyas. What does that mean? You're detached from everything, so you sit around? No. Sannyas means active preaching. We renounce material life, we renounce material desires, not to be lazy fellows. Prabhupada said this movement is no place for lazy or crazy fellows. When we may achieve mukti or nirvana, free from material desire, we take up the active life of spiritual desire. And according to the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that means to share our good fortune with others. So we see that our sannyasis, they're renounced for the purpose of preaching. We mentioned last night, it brought a little bit of laughter, maybe it'll work again. One time Prabhupada said, I've been everywhere and I've seen everything. Because Prabhupada traveled the world 12 times. I've been everywhere, I've seen everything. So one devotee said, well, Prabhupada, could you give us your advice? Prabhupada said, take sannyas. Dukalayam ashashvatam. This is a temporary place full of misery. And that's an advantage a sannyasi might have, that he's always moving, he's constantly traveling. He gets a good assessment of what this world actually is. We may dream, you know, in our apartment or whatever. We don't go beyond our village. But sannyasi sees the whole thing, so we should hear his advice. I've been everywhere and seen everything. Take sannyas. There's nothing in this world. When Prabhupada gave sannyas to Satsvarup Maharaj, he gave some very pertinent instructions to a sannyasi, which really means to all of us, because we also have, as Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, we have to die before we die. We have to give up everything to become fully attached to Krishna. The moment of death, to go back home, back to Godhead. We have to die before we die. So, sannyasis are, traditionally they're meant to travel alone. That was the Vedic way. It's sometimes said that a sannyasi's life is a lonely life. He's supposed to stay alone so that he doesn't get entangled in any relationships and he's free to travel and preach. And there's one book called the Daksha Smriti. In Daksha Smriti, chapter 735, it says very firmly, Eko bhikshur yatokatashtu dvachaiva mitunam shmitam tvayo dharmastata hyata udvam na nagava yate. In actuality, a sannyasi is alone. 2 sannyasis are considered as good as a household couple. 3 become known as a village, and 4 become known as a town. 1, 2, 3, 4. However, as is often the case, there's higher consideration, especially in the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna Varnantusha Krishnam Sangopam Vishaparshadam Yaknai Sen Katantrayar Yishantihi Shumedashaha. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appeared in this world along with his associates. Some of them were sannyasis, some of them were grihastas, some were vanapastas, some were brahmacharis. Everyone had their role to play to make it Samkirtan. Samkirtan means the complete glorification of the Lord. We're all working together. Ultimately, our identity is just that we're eternal servants of Krishna. But we take on these different ashrams. Prabhupada said, take on that ashram which you feel most comfortable to do your service of helping to spread this movement. So amongst the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there were many grihastas. Just like Prabhupada said, my spiritual master created an army of sannyasis, but to preach now, I'm creating an army of grihastas. And if you read Prabhupada Lilamrita, you'll see how many grihasta couples actually spread this movement. So it's like family. So although this injunction is there in the Daksha Smriti to keep the sannyasi aloof from any other thing but his preaching activities, the higher understanding in our movement, we come together because that's the recommendation. In Kali Yuga, it's congregational chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And the sannyasi is more protected in the association of his god brothers, or even god sisters, or just new devotees who are enthusiastically chanting and coming to artik and going out and preaching. Our strength is in our association. Samsara sarpadushtanam murchitanam kolo yuge asadham bhagavan nama Srimad Vaishnava Sevanam. Those who have been bitten by the serpent, the teeth of the serpent of Kali Yuga, shall get relief from the medicinal herb of Asadham Bhagavan Nama, chanting the holy names, Srimad Vaishnava Sevana, in the association of devotees. When we chant Hare Krishna alone, there's definitely some benefit. When you come together with so many devotees, in that crowd there'll be advanced devotees, there'll be intermediate devotees, there'll be beginning devotees. You'll always find someone more advanced to you in Krishna consciousness. You can take their shelter and chant with them. Like in my initiation letter, Prabhupada gave me a very profound instruction. I won't repeat the whole letter, but in the middle he said, always follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. So as sannyasis, we're meant to come together with our godbrother sannyasis and our godbrother grihastas and our godbrother brahmacharis, and together we can fulfill the desires of Srila Prabhupada. This is sannyasa. Bahubir Militva Kritanam Sankirtam Ichute. This is from Bhakti Sandarbha. When many devotees get together, then only it is known as Sankirtan. So that's the higher consideration. And we mentioned sometimes the higher consideration has to be there, just like in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's an injunction that, well, generally it's understood that the worship of the Shalagram Shila, that's only to be done by the men. But in Hari Bhakti Vilas, it's mentioned that the higher consideration is that when required, ladies can also worship the Shalagram, because the Shalagram is Krishna, worshiping Krishna in so many different forms. And that was confirmed by Prabhupada when he got the first Shalagram, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He was in South India. And the temple gave him a big Shalagram, like this big heavy Shalagram. And first time, Prabhupada says in that purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's just waiting for his students to come to the Brahminical platform so he can introduce worship of the Shalagram Shila. It's a purport, an eternal purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He's just waiting for the members of his movement to come to the standard of mode of goodness so that he can introduce the worship of the Shalagram. But the Shalagram came, and Prabhupada said he gave it to his secretary, Purnima. He was a Sanskrit scholar, Paka, Brahmana. I remember traveling with him one time. He washed his hands 7 times if he ever touched his face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Said, 1, 2. He wrote it 1, 2, 3. Paka Brahmana. So Prabhupada gave him instructions, and they're recorded. There's a tape. I actually had that tape one time. I gave it to one sannyasi from Scotland. And in there, Prabhupada says that you worship this deity, and if you are incapacitated, then your son can worship, and if your son is incapacitated, your wife can worship the Shalagram Shila. A higher consideration. So higher consideration means sannyasis are meant to travel alone, but for the purpose of spreading Sankirtan movement, we all come together and chant very loudly, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So I feel very safe in my sannyas ashram because I have Shiva Raj as my sannyas guru, and I have my good friend, Bhakti Vrinda Govinda Maharaj. Bhakti Vrinda Govinda Maharaj always says it this way, that he feels safe because he has Shiva Maharaj on one side and myself on the other side, left and right. Well, I could say the same thing. But I feel very safe because I have Shiva Swami on one side, and I have Bhakti Vrinda Govinda Maharaj on one side, and I have Niranjan Swami whispering in my ear. Be a good boy. And I hope to also realize the true purport of the sannyas ashram, which is there in our sannyas mantra. Although Maharaj didn't quote it, not always appropriate, but the mantra is there on the internet. It's there in the book of His Holiness Satyananda Swami Maharaj, in explaining the various mantras that we chant. The sannyas mantra, the mantra given, there's 2 mantras given. One is from the 11th count of the Bhagavatam, another is the first one-liner that we chant. And Satyananda Swami actually printed it, and he gives a purport on it. So I just like to mention that mantra, what is the mood that one who's renounced everything for what? What have we renounced everything for? We're followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Prabhupada said on several occasions, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's generally understood that their goal is to go back to Goloka Vrindavan and serve the Lord in the mood of a manjari. I won't go into detail, but Prabhupada has a step generally that, although there are followers, Ram Bhaktas, Anupam was the brother of Rupa and Sanatan, but he was in the mood of Raghupati Raghava Rajaram Patita Pavan, and others tried to convince him, no, you have to Golok. And Mahaprabhu said, leave him alone. So that's it, but the general understanding. So the sannyasis are meant to be exemplary in the principle of renunciation. But the idea is you can't give something up. unless you get something better. So true renunciation means to hold on tightly to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. And by that means we actually become renounced. That's Niti Shastra. Charanita Pandit says that. You can't give up something unless you get something better. It's not logically possible. It's possible for all of us because we have something much better, infinitely better than anything this world has to offer. And it's compact there in the 32 syllables. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And Prabhupada always put it very simply again so we could easily understand. He said Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and he's present in the sound of his name. So we can achieve that exalted goal of going back to Goloka Vrindavan simply by being strict in the principles and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. It's very clear for the sannyasis. Om Klim Gopi Bhav Ashraya Svaha. I take shelter of the mood of the gopis' service to Krishna. But the mantra can also mean Gopi Bhavasya Ashraya, he who is the shelter of Gopi Bhava, according to the scholars. I checked this with our Shastra Advisory Committee. It can also mean he who is the shelter of Gopi Bhava. So a deeper understanding for sannyasis who meditate on this mantra 3 times a day, I offer myself to Gauranga, who is the shelter of Gopi Bhava, and who is himself sheltered in Gopi Bhava. So please all of you bless us, aspiring, just like no one says, I'm a devotee. We consider ourselves aspiring devotees. Humility is essential for advancing in Krishna consciousness. So Maharaj very humbly said he has yet to realize the 2 purport of sannyas, which is not true. That fact that he said that humility demonstrates he has that understanding. So, but still we consider ourselves aspiring sannyasis. We want to come to the highest standard both in our renunciation and our Vraj Bhakti. Maharaj was always lamenting. He was very humble. He didn't say, I'm always hearing him say, when is the prem going to come? When is the prem? The race isn't over until it's over. We want to one day sit down and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, and have a tear come to our eye. O Govinda, feeling our separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. These higher stages, of course, we admit, we're honest where we are, but we know it's the goal. We spend our whole lives trying to attain that goal. So one of the frustrations of old age, besides the ailments that come up every day, a different one, is that we haven't yet achieved that goal of Vraj Bhakti. So we depend upon the mercy of all of you, merciful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavas. You please bless us that we can achieve that exalted state and please our spiritual master, not only by preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world, but by one day, by his grace and by your mercy, achieve that spirit state of devotional service, where we go back home, back to Godhead, and we serve Krishna in that intimacy of loving devotion. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Good number. I've read the whole of the Bhagavatam. To actually really understand the essence of the Bhagavatam, at least in my studies of it, multiple times, well, not really study, but reading and some study, I really couldn't get such a clear picture of what the Bhagavata Amrita, what the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam was until I read Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and the goal may have been clear before we received that, and the path of how to get there and how others, in this case how this Gop Kumar did, was very exemplary and very inspirational. Anyway, it's a book that's worth reading. It makes understanding Srimad Bhagavatam very, very easy. In essence, the Amrita. And anyway, the hero of the second part, the first part is Narada, the second part is a cowherd boy, a devotee who's on his path of perfection, whose name is Gopkumar, and after attaining perfection, he's sent back into this world by Srimati Radharani to deliver one particular devotee who's looking for what the purpose of life is, but really doesn't quite know. And in order to teach him, the Gopkumar actually tells his own sort of life story, his own path to perfection. And there's a very interesting passage there that says that it is not proper for Vaishnavas to speak about their own history, about themselves. But then he did it for a greater purpose or a greater cause. I don't know, I may speak a little about how I got here, age 70. I'm not quite sure if there's a greater cause. If there's only 3 people here who want to take sannyas, maybe if afterwards a few more are added to the number. Anyway, you can let me know if I'm stepping out of line. Kulina Maharaj has arrived. I sort of started my peripheral connection with Krishna consciousness around 1969, and was sort of started becoming much more serious in 71 and 72, and in the spring of 1973 was when I joined. And we're from Montreal, by the way, which is in Canada. So I'm not American, not that I have anything against Americans. My best friends are Americans. Just a point of clarification. And in Montreal there was a wonderful temple. That building is still there. It was in a converted bowling alley, and that's where we used to go. And at the time, 2 very extraordinary, inspirational devotees were heading it up. One, his name was Vishwakarma, and the other one was the temple president, whose name was Udama. And they used to have extraordinary kirtans. I think to this day, Vishwakarma still takes the credit for the only devotee who connected a mridanga up to a wow-wow and fuzz pedal. I don't know if you know what a wow-wow pedal is. It's something that guitarists use. But sometime around, I don't know, 1972, when I was coming to the temple, then there was a sannyasi there, he didn't stay sannyas for very long. I was married at that time, and I was very inspired by the sannyasi. He was there for multiple weeks, and he used to come for the Sunday program. And I remember going home once and telling my wife, you know, I'd really like to be like sannyasi. They're really far out. They're very renounced. They don't speak to women. They don't even look at women. My wife said, well, he certainly looks at me. And she was very attractive. So that was my first come down with sannyas. I was disappointed at that. And that was sort of a basic seed. I joined, and in moving into the Montreal temple, I did have an understanding with my wife that we were going our separate ways. And And that was very wonderful. I never had any second thoughts. I don't know where she is or what she's doing. I hope she's involved in Krishna consciousness in some way. And from Montreal, I had various journeys to Winnipeg, from Winnipeg on to Minneapolis, and from Minneapolis I ended up in Chicago. And Chicago was the place where, at least I was, at the time in 1977 when Srila Prabhupada left this world, which for, now that's sort of a expression or a phrase. For Srila Prabhupada's disciples, it was like the end of the world. And of course, it wasn't completely the end of the world because we're still here, but it felt like the end of the world at that time. And it sort of brought back to me the importance of that initial commitment that I had made 4 years earlier, 5 years earlier, to sort of give up everything. And sometime a little later, I think once sort of the trauma subsided a little in 1978, I approached a GBC. And his name was Jai Tirtha Prabhu. He was a Grihastha. Unfortunately, I was going to say he's not in this world. Rather I'll say he passed away. He may be in this world, I don't know, but he passed away some years later. And I told him that I wanted to take sannyas. He was very accommodating, he was a real gentleman. And he said, fine, I'll propose your name to the GBC. At that time, taking sannyas was certainly easier than it is at the present time. And aside from, I can't remember, but there was one objection about some particular thing, although no one really knew me, who I was. And of course my sannyas guru couldn't be a grihastha, so he suggested that I accept sannyas from Satsvarup Maharaj. And that was a very wonderful experience, because in between that time at the GBC in 1978, this meeting said, yes, you can take sannyas, up until the time that I did it. The next year, I was visiting Satsvarup Maharaj, and at that time Satsvarup Maharaj was writing Prabhupada Rasamrita. So, no, nothing could come out. And I was reading some of his manuscripts, and at that time there was things weren't being written on computer; they were written on typed, and there was a host of editors and typists and transcribers, and there were things in there that aren't, unfortunately, in Prabhupada Lilamrita. I remember a few of them. I'm not going to mention them, but they're very inspirational about Srila Prabhupada, that I guess for some reason the editors decided not to put in. And then in 1979, at that time, I don't think I didn't, how could I have known Viduna Maharaj, because he was in Europe and I was in Chicago. And we took sannyas, and that was a wonderful, wonderful event. We were young men, we were much slimmer, probably about half the weight. In fact, there's that picture that we were just shown. I was very, very sick. I thought I was going to actually die in Jagannath Puri. But Lord Jagannath intervened. And And we entered into that renounced order of life of the devotees. Vaishnavas here. I knew His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Govinda Swami Maharaj, who was actually my older godbrother, and he was the head cook in Toronto at that time. In Toronto and Montreal, there was 300 miles between the two cities, and there was a real connection between the two. And he was the one who introduced me to samosas, and yes, he was there at my first initiation. Second? Just first. So, satnyas, it means to actually give up everything for sat. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Nasate vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sabhava. Sat is that which is eternal, that which is spiritual, that which is transcendental. And of course there are many phases, many things that relate to this transcendence or spirituality. But in one particular lecture where Srila Prabhupada mentions sannyas, he talks about the ultimate sannyasis. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Anashrita karma palam karam karam karoti yasa sannyasi cha yogi cha niragnir na chakriya. That sannyas isn't necessarily connected to the clothes that we wear. It's not necessarily connected to this formal ceremony. Govinda Swami Maharaj mentioned that Prabhupada did want everyone to take sannyas, and that means men and women. Not with the official type of sannyas ceremony, and of course not for ladies, but actually real sannyas within. And that sannyas within is actually personified by the example of Srila Prabhupada and explains of the gopis. They really gave up everything. They didn't take sannyas, but they were actually more than sannyasis. As Govinda Maharaj had said, a sannyasi may give up family affection. He gives up his family. He becomes, Prabhupada often mentioned, socially dead. But a sannyas, the gopis, they also abandoned. When Krishna played the flute, then Bhagavatam says, even they were feeding their children, their babies, the little babies, they left them. How many of you ladies would just leave your children, little babies? And even if your husbands protest, although that may be a little more easier attachment to overcome, women are usually more attached to their children than to their husbands, but they left. And Krishna called, and they went. But they gave up more than just that family affection. They also gave up their reputations. Now, sannyasi is very particular about his reputation. In fact, it's the only thing that he has, his good name. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu points out that a sannyasi to just misbehave, it's like one ink spot on a white sheet, then it immediately shows up. But gopis didn't care about their reputation in a culture where reputation really counts for everything. In the world that we live in, world outside, reputation is no longer such an important thing. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we want to establish that it is. But even here, we have such a thing as forgiveness. Sort of in that Vedic culture, especially when it comes to women going off to another man, there's no forgiveness. If a girl, for instance, goes out and comes back late at night alone, strict Vedic code, the family just throw her out. You dishonored family, so you have to leave. And then the village, and so they were willing to sacrifice all of that. And ultimately that's something that we also have to sacrifice, because when Krishna says Sarva Dharma Parityaja, he's referring to that type of inner attachment to Krishna, which is really only possible to attain. Or excuse me, it is the only thing that will actually really enable a person to become fully detached. You cannot become detached just by, oh, I'm going to practice renunciation, I'm giving something up, because Rupa Goswami points out that you have nothing to give up. Anasaktasya visayan yatha hadupayindita. Nothing belongs to us, so what is the question of us giving anything up? But real detachment from everything and anything, except for the association of Vaishnavas, pure association. Not because it's my son or husband or daughter or wife, but because they're Vaishnavas. They're servants of Krishna. And that's the attachment. So the gopis actually showed that. And in our taking sannyas, we receive a mantra, and that mantra has to do with this whole direction of the gopis. In fact, it's about taking shelter of that same mood that the gopis showed, because that's the only way really that one can really become a sannyasi and become detached. Real detachment only comes by attachment to Krishna, and attachment to Krishna comes by hearing about him. Without hearing about him, it's not possible. Even chanting Hare Krishna will not mature attachment to Krishna unless we hear. It's the combination of Shravanam Kirtanam that will actually awaken that type of inner attachment that will enable us to actually really be sannyasis. So 40 years ago I took sannyas, but I have to admit I'm still not that kind of sannyasi. And I'm waiting for that type of sannyas to really manifest. We're sitting here at the lotus feet of Gaura Nitai and Radha Krishnas, Jagannath. And by the mercy of Gaura, then perhaps we also get that blessings to be able to be really sannyasi in the mood of the gopis, and not just the gopis, but actually all the residents of Vrindavan. It's a special type of attachment that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, but particularly that which is illuminated by the love of the gopis, who are the ultimate sannyasis. They're the ultimate example for us renunciates, as well as for all the members of the Krishna consciousness movement. And Hare Krishna, I pass the microphone to Indra Swami Maharaj. And Hare Krishna. Since then we actually became best friends, because we had opportunity to meet and chant together and take lots of prasadam together, and more prasadam, and to develop Vaishnava relationships which are really a type of, that's something that you can't give up. The affection between Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Your microphone is now on.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Kunja, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, oh, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare 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 Rama Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare
Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, के, पंच तत्व के Iskam Sanjay Shri Prabhupada ki, Jiva Madhava ki, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Govardhan ki.
Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Bhuti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Prachare Nirvishesha Shanyavari Pastacharya Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I cannot speak long because I'm actually supposed to be over on the main stage at 4:15. I was thinking about what to speak on when I heard different topics about sannyas. Of course, there's Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas, but I was also thinking about some verses that were spoken by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Two very well-known verses that were composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and they're cited in Chaitanya Charitamrita. I wanted to read them and then speak a little bit from them. And I'll connect it to sannyas also. Actually, he was a kshetra sannyas. So, although he was a householder, he was actually a kshetra sannyas. He refused to leave Jagannath Puri. But, either here or there. The verses of Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, Sikshartam Eka Purusha Purana, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shariradhari, Kripam Buddhya Yastamaham Prabhadye. Let me take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, who has descended in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us real knowledge, his devotional service, and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness. He has descended because he is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Let me surrender unto his lotus feet. The second verse is Kalan Nashtam Bhakti Yogam Vijaya Pradushkartam Krishna Chaitanya Nama Avyarbhutas Tasya Padarda Vinde Gadham Viyatam Chittavrinda. Let my consciousness, which is like a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. This system had almost been lost due to the influence of time. Purport. As Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanya Bhavati Bharata Abhyutanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Shijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and the predominant rise in irreligion, at that time I descend myself. This is also the case with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this world as a disguised incarnation of Krishna, but his appearance is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, and other Vedic scriptures. He appeared in order to teach the fallen souls in this material world For in this age of Kali, almost everyone has become attached to fruitive and ritualistic activities and mental speculation. Consequently, there was a great need to revive the system of devotional service. The Lord himself personally came down disguised as a devotee so that the fallen populace might take advantage of the Lord's example. At the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna advised complete surrender unto him, promising all protection to his devotee. Unfortunately, people are so fallen that they cannot accept the instructions of Lord Krishna. Therefore, Krishna returned with the same mission, but he executed it in a different way. As Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he ordered us to surrender unto himself. But as Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught us how to surrender to Krishna. Therefore he is praised by the Goswamis, Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate. Lord Shri Krishna is certainly the personality of Godhead, but he is not as magnanimous as Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Krishna simply gave orders for one to become his devotee, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta, but Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually taught the process of Krishna consciousness. If one wants to become a devotee of Krishna, he must first take shelter of the lotus feet of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, following in the footsteps of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and other exalted devotees. It's interesting that these verses were composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. If we take into consideration his position prior to the composition of these verses, he was known as the reservoir of all bad logic. He was totally influenced by Mayavad philosophy. Although he was a very learned scholar, and it's described how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, his father was Maheshwara Visharada, who was also a scholar, had a school. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said that he went to Mithila to study Nyaya and Vedanta there. And at that time, they had a sort of like a stranglehold in there at that place of the teachings of Nyaya, which is logic and argument and Vedanta. And the students weren't allowed to write anything, or no books were there. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had gone there and to learn these topics. And he was such a learned person that everything that he heard he memorized. And then he later went and opened up a school. I think it was in Navadvip for some time, and then he moved to Puri and opened up a school in Jagannath Puri. And it was there in Jagannath Puri that he had taken Kshetra Sannyas, and he would vow to never leave Puri. Some people say that he memorized everything, and then he went and opened the school, and he wrote everything down from memory and used that as material for teaching his students. Said elsewhere also that he learned from his father, Maheshwara Visharada, and that was the basis of his knowledge. But nonetheless, his knowledge was that of Nyaya, logic and argument, and Vedanta, with an impersonal understanding. And nonetheless, although that was his background, of course, Gaura Ganadeshtapika also explains that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was actually Brihaspati, who actually had come to assist the Lord in his pastimes. Yesterday we were giving class about the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, explaining how the Lord had requested certain devotees to precede him. Krishna himself had made a personal request. He asked Jagannath Mishra, he asked Sachimata, he asked Madhavendra Puri, he asked Ishwara Puri, he asked Pundarik Vijayanidhi. All of them, they came and they descended before him, Haridas Thakur, and they took birth in various places. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also is explained here as Brihaspati, who came to assist the Lord in his pastimes. Nonetheless, as we were saying, that it's interesting to note that these verses that he composed, Kaviraj Goswami states about these verses, he says, these two verses composed by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya will always declare his name and fame as loudly as a pounding drum, for they have become pearl necklaces around the necks of all devotees. Such is the nature of these verses. Prabhupada oftentimes quoted this verse, Radha Vijay Vijay Bhakti Yoga, Sikshate Purusha Purnima, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Sarirada, Kripambudya Yastamaham Bhakti. Glorifies the Lord. Now when he wrote these verses, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wanted to actually bring these verses and give them to Lord Chaitanya. And first he brought them and he gave them to Lord Chaitanya. He was staying in Puri, he was staying there with Jagadananda was present. And I think Kunja was also present. And he showed these verses to them and said, "Can you please deliver these verses to the Lord?" Now the Lord, of course, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, he appeared as Chana avatar. He was a hidden incarnation. His mood was always that of a devotee of the Lord, and he did not want to in any way, shape or form hear that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And knowing that, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya showed these two verses to Mukunda Dat and Jagadananda and asked him to bring it in, Mukunda Dat was thinking, when the Lord sees these verses, I don't know, I can't predict what he's going to do with them. So he took the two verses which were on a palm leaf, and he wrote them down on the side of the hut that Lord Chaitanya was staying in, these verses. And then Jagadananda brought the verses into the hut, showed them to the Lord looked at them, and he immediately tore them up. Didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear it. And there are many cases of this also. In Chaitanya Bhagavat there's a nice description also of Advaita Acharya, that one time he was having a kirtan. And when he saw Lord Chaitanya, he decided to start glorifying Lord Chaitanya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and glorifying his names, although previously they had been engaged in chanting Krishna's names. But at this particular time, when Advaita Acharya saw the Lord, he decided, now I'm going to start chanting the names of Gauranga. So he started chanting the names very loudly, and he was surrounded by all the devotees, and the devotees were very intimidated. They're thinking, what's going to happen when Lord Chaitanya hears this? You know, he's not going to like it. But they looked at Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya was like chanting the names ferociously like a lion, very loudly. And when they looked at him and saw his audacity to chant Gauranga's names in this way, they started to get some confidence. So they started chanting along with him. And when Lord Chaitanya heard them, he immediately went, and he left that place, and he went into the room and he closed the door. And Advaita Acharya with all the devotees, they followed him to the room, still chanting the names of Gauri, Gauranga, Gauranga, Gauranga. And they opened the door, and Lord Chaitanya didn't want to hear it. But still he kept on chanting loudly, loudly, and There was some conversation, I think it was Srivas Pandit, who put his hands up. And he said, Lord Chaitanya said, no, why are you doing this? Why are you chanting these names? And Srivas put his hand up and put his hand in front of the Lord. He said, what does this mean? He says, just like if you try to block the sun with your hand, it's impossible. So it's in the same way, you're trying to hide yourself, but we know who you are. You cannot hide. We know you're that same personality who was invited by Advaita Acharya to come to this world to deliver the fallen souls. This is your actual identity. Please don't try to hide it from us. We can see who you are. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, he had to accept it, but that was his mood. He didn't want to hear. He didn't want to hear that he was the Supreme Personality, but his mood was always that. And as we were reading yesterday, we were speaking at the Vaishnava Academy, and when Lord Krishna actually was speaking, and he was describing his own purpose for which he wanted to come. He said, I want to come as a devotee and teach devotional service by my example. Because if he can teach by his example, then this is, and then Prabhupada speaks about this point in the purport we just read also, that Lord Chaitanya was even more magnanimous than Krishna himself, because when Krishna came, he said, Savardhamam Puritaja, Mamikam Saranam Braja. When Krishna came, he demanded that you surrender. But Lord Chaitanya, he took away that condition, and he taught by his example what real surrender is. And as we know what real surrender is, when Krishna says, Savadhamam Purichaja Mamikam Saranam Vraja in Bhagavad Gita, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that all the components of that surrender were in the previous verse. Man mana bhava madbhakta madhyajimam namaskuru. To always think of me, worship me, offer your homages unto me, surely you'll come to me. So Lord Chaitanya, he's even more magnanimous than Krishna himself, because Krishna set the condition, and first you surrender, but Lord Chaitanya simply came to teach by his example what is surrender. And he explains in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Adi Leela, and there are very many verses which explain very clearly that how can one teach devotional service if he doesn't practice it himself? How will I teach? I have to practice it myself. Otherwise, who will follow? And he quotes various verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Yad yada chariti sheshtas tadhalevetu rojana sayat pamanam kurute lokastaranduvartate. That whatever actions are performed by great men, then common men will follow in his footsteps. Whatever standards he sets by his exemplary acts, all the world pursues. And he says, when I come, and then I have to teach by example, because if I don't teach by my example, then the whole world will be put to ruination if everybody will follow my example. So these verses are given by Kaviraj Goswami in explaining what was Krishna's mood prior to his appearance. And that's why he decided to come again, as Prabhupada said in the purport. This time he came again as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but with a different purpose, a different method for teaching surrender, than Lord Krishna, simply by his words. Lord Chaitanya taught by his example. So, therefore, he was always in the mood of a devotee, and except for the very short time that he revealed his divinity during the Mahaprakash Leela in the house of Srivas Thakur, when he stood on the altar and he gave benedictions to the different devotees and revealed his actual identity at that time. Generally, he did not expose so much his divinity, except his devotees. They recognized, they knew, such as we just explained before, they knew who he was. But even in the very beginning when the Lord appeared, although he asked all his associates to come to this world, and associates took birth at various places to purify those places, and they all came to Navadvip, it's explained that the associates of the Lord, although they were eternal associates of the Lord, they didn't even know who each other were. They when they came together and they were actually discussing Krishna Katha, they didn't know who these personalities were in this by Yogamaya potency. They didn't know. They didn't know who the Lord was. Even on the way to the Acharya, he didn't recognize his Lord. When at the way to the Acharya, when young Nimai would come to get his brother Vishwarup to take him from hearing Hari Katha from Advaita Acharya, when he was preaching the glories of devotional service. And when young Nimai would come and tell him it's time to go home, brother, Mata's calling, it's time for lunch, please come. And as Vrindavan Das Thakur says that when Nimai would come to that place, how was he dressed? He was clothed by the four directions. But so attractive, so attractive. A little baby, young Nimai. And when Advaita Acharya, he would look at young Nimai, he became so captivated by his beauty that he became stunned. He couldn't speak. He stopped speaking. And everybody else who saw them, they just became stunned by his beauty. And Advaita Acharya began looking within his heart, what is it about this child that's so attractive to my heart? What is it? Although he was the same person who called him to come. He called him by offering Tulsi and Ganges to Shalagam Shiva. He understood that at the particular time people were so much absorbed in this Nyaya, this logic and argument, study of the Vedanta, but it's actually described in Chaitanya Bhagavat, people were studying Shastras, but their only purposes for studying Shastras was to get into arguments. That's all. That was their goal, that was their objective. Who can defeat who? I have a better guru than you have, because I can defeat you, and you can't defeat me, therefore my guru is better. And this was their whole enthusiasm for studying Shastras, to get into argument, and to see who could defeat who. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says that even though so much Shastra was spoken, the word bhakti never came out of anyone's mouth. This was the situation. This was the situation at that time. And he also says, Vrindavan Das Thakur also states that when people come together for large gatherings, usually it was for weddings and birthdays. That was it. And then, although they would engage in worship, they would worship the goddess Chandi for material benefits. This was the situation that Advaita Acharya was seeing, and he understood that I don't think I can do anything to deliver these people, only if I can bring Krishna himself. Krishna himself must come. If I can invoke him to come, then certainly because only Krishna can bestow this kind of devotional service to the fallen people in this age. So, although Advaita Acharya invoked, and Lord Chaitanya many times says, and it's stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that one of the purposes for Lord Chaitanya's descent was to answer the call of Advaita Acharya. He had his internal purposes that he had to fulfill, but he also had his external purposes. It was the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord, to relish the sweet taste of the holy name of the Lord, and also to answer the call of Advaita Acharya. So Advaita Acharya called him, but he didn't recognize his Lord. Didn't know. He was covered. Of course, in the beginning, not many people knew about his identity. So, therefore, when Lord Chaitanya saw these verses on the palm leaf, he tore them up. Because he didn't want them to, said right there, I glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who's come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's come to teach devotion to himself. He's come to teach detachment from anything that doesn't foster Krishna consciousness. He's come to teach devotional service. He is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Many verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita describe Lord Chaitanya as this ocean of transcendental mercy. Kaviraj Goswami, in one of his invocation verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he glorifies Lord Chaitanya as, let me offer my obeisance to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is an ocean of transcendental mercy. And although the subject of bhakti is very difficult to understand, Lord Chaitanya is so merciful that he made bhakti so easily accessible in this age of Kali. How do you make it so easily accessible? Sometimes we foolishly think that the way to make bhakti easily accessible is to package it in a way that's attractive. This is how people think that this is how to make bhakti easily accessible. Let's package it so people will be attracted. But what is Kaviraj Goswami? How did Lord Chaitanya make it so easily accessible? He made it so easily accessible because he was practicing it fully himself. And therefore people seeing his devotion, people seeing his tears from his eyes, people seeing his taste for the holy name of the Lord, people seeing his ecstatic symptoms, simply by seeing, people became devotees of the Lord. This is how he made it accessible, because he practiced it himself. Krishna himself had to come to bring that mercy and to practice it himself, to teach others. This is what love of Godhead is. This kind of attachment to the holy name, this kind of attachment, this mood of surrender and service. And then this verse that we also read, let my consciousness, which is like a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. Uh-oh, I forgot. Hare Krishna. I wanted to say something else. I mean, I wanted to get to the sannyas part, because topic was about sannyas. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, if you remember, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri, and as he was entering Jagannath Puri, first place he went to the Jagannath temple, and when he went to the Jagannath temple, he fell down in ecstatic trance upon seeing Lord Jagannath, and it was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who made an arrangement to take Lord Chaitanya to his home, and he was concerned about this young sannyasi, and gradually Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was thinking that, well, maybe what is it, what are the symptoms that he's manifesting? He put cotton under his nose and he began to perceive that actually that it's probably that he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms. Then there was a whole, gradually when Nityananda and Haridas Thakur and others came, they also came behind Lord Chaitanya. They went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house on the request of Gopinathacharya, and Gopinathacharya then had a discussion with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Gopinathacharya not only had a discussion, but he was very disturbed because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had made a suggestion after that this young sannyasi, he has taken the vows of sannyas from an inferior sampradaya, who is taking the sannyas. When he heard his previous situation from Gopinathacharya, because he asked Gopinathacharya, tell me, what is the previous situation of this sannyasi? And Gopinathacharya said, well, he was actually the son of Jagannath Mishra and Sachimata, and his what was his relationship with Nilambar Chakravarti? It was the father of his mother, Sachimata's, And Nilambar Chakravarti was an associate of Maheshwara Visharada, who was the father of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he began to describe his previous situation. He also began to describe from whom he took sannyas, from Keshava Bharati. And then, when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya heard his previous situation, he said, actually he's taken sannyas from an inferior sampradaya, from the Bharati sampradaya. What would be better is if he takes sannyas again from me, I'll give him his cloth, and he can take sannyas in a superior sampradaya. And in this way, he presented this as a proposal to Gopinath Acharya, and when Gopinath Acharya heard it, he said, you don't understand. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there's no question of any external formalities required for him, for his sannyas. And why are you making such a suggestion? And then there was an argument that ensued that how Gopinath Acharya was trying to convince him on what basis he had ascertained that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the students of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya were giving him their evidence, and they were saying, what evidence do you have that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And they went back and forth in the different types of evidence, and of course the result was that Gopinath Acharya, although he presented all the evidence, clearly how he could understand that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nonetheless Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was still of the same opinion and did not change. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, he understood Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's mentality, and later there was a discussion between Lord Chaitanya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Lord Chaitanya expressed total humility in the presence of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He actually treated him as a superior person and submitted himself to be instructed by him. And when he submitted himself to be instructed by him, then a conversation ensued. And there's a very interesting conversation, part of this conversation, which is not Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And I wanted to read these verses because it was what Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said about sannyas. Now, of course, we know Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was speaking about, and Indradumna Maharaj also alluded to it, the Mayavad sannyas. Because it was Mayavad sannyas, which was actually what everybody was accepting at the time. And even Lord Chaitanya, he had his Ekadanda, and he did that, of course. He took sannyas in order to attract everybody in this way. But nonetheless, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was giving various arguments of why you taking sannyas. And they're very nice, interesting quotes about sannyas that I wanted to read. Is from Chaitanya Bhagavat, and they are, it's in the, I think it's Anshya Leela. Chapter 3, yeah, Anshya Leela. There's a conversation. It said that by the arrangement of providence, the Lord one day sat down in a solitary place with Sarvabhauma. The Lord said, listen, Sarvabhauma Mahashaya, let me reveal my heart to you. Although I came to see Jagannath, my main purpose here was to meet you. Will Jagannath speak to me? It is you who will completely destroy my material bondage. This is Lord Chaitanya speaking. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. You are fully empowered by Lord Krishna, so you were able to award one loving devotional service to Krishna. This is, of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his Tika gives a very interesting point here. He says, realizing that Sarvabhauma's desire for the four objectives of life was simply deceitful, Sri Gaurasundar also deceitfully told him that he had come to Nilachala to take instruction from Sarvabhauma. And that Sarvabhauma had the power to bestow on one loving devotional service to Krishna. Then Lord Chaitanya says, therefore I take shelter of you, do whatever you consider is beneficial for me. What rules and regulations should I follow? How should I live? Please instruct me so that I do not fall into the well of material life. As we know Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was very, very concerned that he's very young. How can he make such vows of sannyas and be renounced? He should hear Vedanta from me so he can become sufficiently renounced. That's what he was thinking. Such a young man, such an attractive man. And he really was saying, with beauty like yours, how do you think you're going to stay celibate? Everybody's going to be attracted to you. He was giving such kind of arguments. Of course, we just heard today that devotees took sannyas at a very young age. Nonetheless, we see they have Mahaprabhu's mercy. They kept their vows because of their attachment to Lord Chaitanya and the service of Lord Chaitanya. So he says, what rules and regulations should I follow? How should I live? Please instruct me so that I do not fall into the well of material life. Please instruct me without reservation. Know for certain that I am a soul surrendered to you. In this way, Gaura used various means to delude Sarvabhauma while speaking to him. Without realizing the Lord's intention, Sarvabhauma began to speak about the religious duties of living entities. Sarvabhauma said, "I appreciate everything you have said." Of course, he didn't say, "No, I'm not so advanced. I appreciate everything you said." Interesting. The devotion that has awakened in you is certainly most wonderful and beyond description. You have attained Krishna's mercy, but you have done one thing that is improper. Although you are most intelligent, why did you take sannyas? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says in his Tika, Sarvabhauma said, "O Krishna Chaitanya, you have attained Krishna's mercy and you are most intelligent, so why did you take sannyas? What qualification do you have to take sannyas? You're too young." Personalities like Madhavaja Puri have taken sannyas, but they have done so after maturely enjoying material life. Before accepting sannyas, you should have particularly considered that everyone respects a sannyasi as a member of the topmost ashram. Since you have accepted Vaishnava principles which entail becoming humbler than a blade of grass, what need was there to become a candidate for receiving the highest respect found in social etiquette? Giving up shika and brahmin thread is an example of pride. It is simply the desire to ascend to the highest level of fame. A person following Vaishnava principles should offer obeisances to a dog eater, a cow, and an ass, and he should not accept respect from anyone. Interesting how Sri Ramaraj said that's the one possession that a sannyasi has. Prabhupada said that also, is respect. If he loses respect, how can he preach? Of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is speaking this way because he didn't know the glories of Vaishnava sannyas. What to speak of the glories of Vaishnava sannyas, who later converted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya into the greatest Vaishnava, although he was a reservoir of all bad logic, and who composed his verses, Vairagya Vijja Bhakti Yoga, as a result of Lord Chaitanya's complete humility, who sat there for 7 days and continuously listened to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya recite Vedanta for 7 continuous days. And then after 7 days, Sarvabhauma said, "Why have you not said anything? At least, can you give me some indication that you've understood something? And if you haven't understood that, you must have some questions." But Lord Chaitanya said, although I've been listening to what you said, I have had a difficult listening to you. I'm listening to the Vedanta, but you've clouded the whole you've clouded the Vedanta with your own interpretations, and therefore I cannot hear you. Anyways, this Lord Chaitanya was always manifesting this respectful attitude, and therefore he sat and he listened. So therefore, a person following Vaishnava principles should offer obeisance to a dog eater, a cow, and an ass. Should not accept respect from anyone. Mayavadi sannyasis in particular consider themselves equal to the Supreme Lord, who is the creator, maintainer, and annihilator. Therefore, they are unworthy sons and foolish. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, just consider, what is the use of accepting sannyas? One immediately becomes bound by the ropes of false ego. One who carries a danda considers himself a great person and does not fold his hands before anyone. A sannyasi is not afraid to accept obeisances from such a personality that the Vedas declare the dust of his feet should be respected. False ego is never good. Try to understand the words of Srimad Bhagavatam in this regard. Realizing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has entered the body of every living entity, as the Supersoul, one should offer obeisances before all, even the dogs, outcasts, cows, and asses falling flat upon the ground like a rod. You should offer full obeisances to all living entities, including the Brahmins, dogs, and dog-eaters. Vaishnava etiquette is to offer respects to everyone, But one who is a hypocrite has no attachment for this. The only gain in giving up one's Shika and Brahman thread is that respectable people offer one their obeisances. This is the first loss in accepting sannyas. Now hear about the other loss by which one's intelligence becomes polluted. Of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is trying to convince Lord Chaitanya that he shouldn't have, in these verses, that you shouldn't have taken sannyas in this way. You're too young and you may fall from your position. But Lord Chaitanya, of course, as we know by his perfect example of complete renunciation, Vairagya Vijnanija Bhakti Yoga, because he taught devotional service, he taught everyone how to become attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. He taught everyone by his example how to achieve complete renunciation, by becoming attached from anything that material that doesn't foster Krishna consciousness. How did he do this? Because he gave the higher taste. With a conception of sannyas to renounce this world, understanding that this world, was it you that quoted the verse? Anasaktasya vishayam yataham upayanjata nirvana Krishna samadhe yuktam varaginuchite. Prabhupada would oftentimes quote the verse that one who renounces things without understanding their relationship with the Supreme Personality of God can never be as complete in his renunciation as one who sees everything connected to Krishna and uses everything for Krishna's service. So Lord Chaitanya, he taught the ideal principle of renunciation. He taught the ideal position of sannyas by his example. And he was able to convert even the most hard-hearted logician who is attached to logic and argument and study of Vedanta with an impersonal conception to become a lover of Krishna. So much did he become a lover of Krishna that he even tried to suggest to Lord Chaitanya later. He says, there's one verse I read in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Tateno kapam sushamikshmano bhujana evatma kritam vibhakam pridvagva pabhirvidanam namaste jiveti yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. And he tried to make a proposal to Lord Chaitanya because he became such an ecstatic lover of Godhead that when he heard this word mukti, immediately what arose in his heart was anger. Mukti. Something's wrong. I suggest we change this word from mukti to bhakti. And he wanted to make this recommendation to Lord Chaitanya that this mukti pade is not proper. It should say bhakti pade. Of course, Lord Chaitanya convinced them that actually mukti pade means mukti pad, that all liberations take shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. And therefore he is known as mukti pad. And therefore we're saying that actually mukti pade is actually speaking of Krishna. There's another example, explanation he gave for mukti pad. Do you remember what it was? He gave to ultimate mukti is devotional service. Yes. Ultimate mukti is devotional service. So, although Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wanted to change mukti pade to bhakti pade, and nonetheless Lord Chaitanya, by his mercy, he was able to convert Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya into the personality who would compose these two wonderful verses about Lord Chaitanya, which would be heard and resounded throughout the world just like a pounding drum. And the glories of Lord Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a little bit about the pastimes of the Lord, his appearance, his purpose for his appearance, and we thought we would present a little bit about sannyas, because the topic of a sannyasi was also spoken about today. And then although Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions were very relevant, but they did not know the power of devotional service, that for a devotee of the Lord who sees the Lord in everyone's heart, for a devotee of the Lord who's always attached, etam sa astaya paratmanishtam, because he's paratmanishtam, he's always fully engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Mukunda, he will not fall down if he's always fully taking shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, seeing Krishna in everyone's heart, and preaching Krishna consciousness with full enthusiasm. Lord Chaitanya himself, when he was wandering throughout Radhadesh, even himself he would quote this verse from the Avanti Brahman, Etam sa astaya paratmanishtam, glorifying, Parapanishta, which means the full engagement in devotional service, full meditation on the lotus feet of Mukunda. And this was established by all the previous authorities that this is the best platform of renunciation. This is real sannyas. So I've spoken a little bit longer than I probably should have, but I think I'm going to be late for the kirtan on the stage. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
What can I say after that? And when he began, he spoke for some time, and then he looked at his watch and he went, oops, because he realized that was the time for him to go. And now I look at my watch just in the beginning and I go, oops, because I know that the Abhishek is supposed to be here, and then the devotees can go with the Abhishek in the temple. But I would like to say just one thing before we go. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the beginning, Kaviraj Goswami, he gives his auspicious verses or his Mangalacharanam. And he speaks of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he speaks of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came here to give, and he speaks of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to experience while he was here. He speaks about Nityananda, he speaks about Advaita Acharya, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita Kaviraj Goswami goes into a wonderful description of each of his verses of the Mangalacharanam. When he speaks of Lord Chaitanya, and when he speaks of the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he cites one verse, and he says, Anarpita charin charat korunaya vatyana kalau samarpayitam unata utolarasa. And this Anarpita charin charat, it means that Lord Chaitanya came to give something that had not been given for a very, very long time. And he says, and because he wanted to do that, out of his mercy, he appeared within this world. He's the Karuna avatar, or the avatar of mercy of the Lord. And then he specifically says that what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to give to all of us people of Kali Yuga is Unata Ujjvala Rasa, which means that he came here specifically to bless us all with the most effulgent, the most cherished, the most precious love that is experienced only in Goloka Vrindavan. And many times, all of us as devotees, we use this term love. We speak of love. And naturally, the materialist, his conception of love is one thing. But the devotees, they consider the topic of love in many different ways. And when devotees become a little wiser, they understand that there's not just one type of love. There are many different types of love that are experienced by transcendentalists. Srila Sanatana Goswami, he's made that very apparent in his great literature, Brihad Bhagavatamritam, when he tells the story of Gop Kumar. And Gop Kumar, he received mantra from his spiritual master, and then his journey to Krishna began. And he traveled. He traveled in this world, and he saw that in this world, devotees would possess a level of love for the Lord. He traveled to the higher worlds of heaven, and he saw that in all of the planets of heaven, the devotees there, they loved the Lord in those places in different ways. He went to Vaikuntha, and he saw in Vaikuntha that the devotees there, they all possessed pure love for the forms of the Lord that they were worshiping, but it wasn't that very, very special type of love that he wanted, and that's the special type of love that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave to us. That's the love which is found only in the highest region of the spiritual world, Goloka, which is where Krishna resides with his mother and father, and with the gopis, and with the cowherd boys, and all of his friends, and all of the perfected beings that live there. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came here to give us that. And I feel that, at least for myself, on a day like Gaura Purnima, we should really meditate on this gift of Gaura Prema. We should really meditate on this love. Niranjan Swami Maharaj, he explained how, it should be practiced with full humility, selflessness, always seeing oneself a surrendered servant. And we should cultivate that. We should actively cultivate that each day of our lives. And to do that, what does it mean? It means to do what Srila Prabhupada taught us. Offenseless chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Srila Prabhupada has given us these books. Today we were sitting upstairs and we were reading before coming down here, and these two Maharajas, they were mentioning the point. Yes, there has to be chanting, and there has to be an understanding of these literatures if we wish to actually enter into that dimension of love. In Sanatana Goswami's literature, Brihad Bhagavatamritam, when Gop Kumar has gone all the way to the impersonal Brahman and he meets the representatives of the Lord in the impersonal Brahman, they say, yes, you should go to the spiritual world. Yes, you have qualification. And they explained different qualifications that he had for going to the spiritual world. They said, but if you go to the spiritual world, you'll have to change the nature of the chanting of the holy name. And he said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, now instead of just chanting mechanically, or now just chanting because you've been told to chant, you must chant with love. And naturally his question was, well, how do I learn to chant with love? And the answer that they gave him was study the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you study the topics of the Bhagavatam, then your love for Krishna will awaken. So, anarpita charin charat korunaya vatirna kalao. Something that hadn't been given for such a long time. And Lord Chaitanya, out of his causeless mercy, he came to give it to us. And we're small people of Kali Yuga. And we're beset with so many of the problems of Kali Yuga. But still, by his great mercy and by the mercy of his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, that gift has been given to us. So please work very diligently on the cultivation of this great gift of Nam Sankirtan that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given to us. Hear the Bhakti Shastras, learn the Bhakti Shastras, like we've just had like a volcano of Shastra flowing out of Srila Niranjan Swami Maharaj. Learn the topics of Krishna. Rupa Raghunatha Pade Hoive Akruti Kabi Hamabuja Rase Yugala Pariti. It's only when we understand these teachings of Rupa and Raghunath we'll be able to understand the activities of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. And gain credit, gain mercy, gain blessings from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by giving one's life in service to the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And now it's my oops moment because it's time to go. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
So let's all of us thank Maharajas for sharing Gaura Purnima with us and give us so much nectar today by chanting loudly Hare